My phone buzzed at 2 in the morning. I almost didn't answer. Almost let it go to voicemail like I'd done with every other call from them over the past 2 years. But something made me swipe that green button. Some sick curiosity about what could possibly make them break 2 years of silence. It was my mother's voice. Shaking. Desperate. 3 words that made my blood run cold. Chloe is dying. I stood there in my tiny apartment above the laundromat, barefoot on the cold floor, listening to my mother beg, the same woman who sat in a hospital hallway 2 years ago and told a doctor that I wasn't worth saving. The same woman who watched her husband debate whether to pull the plug on me because the medical bills were too high and I wasn't the daughter with potential. Now she was crying, screaming into the phone about how Chloe needed a kidney transplant, about how they'd tested and weren't matches, about how I was the only hope, about how I had to help because that's what family does. Family. I almost laughed. Almost asked her where this concept of family was when I was 18 years old. Lying in ICU with a fractured skull and a shattered leg. Listening to them, tell the doctor to let nature take its course. Where was family when they threw me out with nowhere to go? No money. No support. Because I was just the daughter who survived the fire instead of the golden child they'd invested everything in. But I didn't say any of that. Not yet. I just hung up. Because what my mother didn't know, what neither of my parents understood, was that the girl who almost died in that fire didn't exist anymore. She burned up in those flames along with everything else. The girl who emerged from the ashes was someone completely different. Someone harder. Someone who finally understood her worth, and now they needed me. Wanted something from me. Expected me to hand over a piece of my body like I owed them something. The audacity was almost beautiful. If you want to know whether I gave them what they wanted, whether I saved the sister they chose over me, and how I made my parents pay for every single thing they did, then you need to hear this whole story. Hit that like button right now. Subscribe because you're not going to want to miss what happens next. And drop a comment telling me what you would do if the family that left you to die came crawling back begging for help. Because I guarantee my answer will shock you. Let me take you back to the beginning. To the night 2 years ago when everything burned. When I learned exactly how much I was worth to my parents. When I discovered that love isn't unconditional when there's an insurance payout on the line. The acrid smell of smoke filled my lungs before I even opened my eyes. For a split second. Still trapped between sleep and consciousness. I thought maybe I was having one of those dreams where you can't breathe. But then the heat hit my face like a slap. And my eyes flew open to a nightmare painted in orange and red. Our house was on fire. This wasn't a small kitchen fire or a candle gone wrong. This was hell unleashed in the place I'd called home for 18 years. Flames crawled up the walls of my bedroom like living things. Hungry and relentless. The wallpaper I'd helped Mom choose when I was 12 was curling and blackening. My bookshelf, the one Dad built when I was 10, was already engulfed. I rolled out of bed, my bare feet hitting the carpet that was already hot to the touch. The smoke was thick, choking, turning the familiar layout of my room into a maze of shadows and death. I grabbed my phone from the nightstand. The screen showed 2:47 a.m. I tried to call 911, but my hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold it. That's when I heard it. A scream that cut through the roar of the fire like a knife. Chloe, my 16-year-old sister's voice, high-pitched with terror, coming from her bedroom down the hall. Without thinking, without even considering my own safety, I wrapped my blanket around myself and burst through my bedroom door into the hallway. The hallway was worse. So much worse. The ceiling was already starting to buckle. Pieces of burning debris falling like hellish snow. The heat was so intense I could feel my skin tightening, my lungs screaming for clean air that didn't exist anymore. Every breath felt like swallowing razor blades dipped in acid. Chloe's door was closed. I could hear her pounding on it from the inside, screaming for help. The wood was hot when I touched the handle, burning my palm, but I didn't care. I threw my weight against it once. Twice. 3 times before it finally gave way. She was huddled in the corner of her room, her face streaked with tears and soot, her eyes wide with terror. At 16, Chloe was beautiful. Everyone said so. She had our mother's delicate features, our father's striking eyes, and a smile that could light up a room. She was the golden child, the talented one, the one with the scholarship offers already rolling in from top universities. She was everything. I wasn't. And I loved her anyway. I grabbed her hand and pulled her to her feet. She was frozen with fear, her body rigid. But I didn't have time for gentle coaxing. I wrapped my blanket around both of us and started pulling her toward the door. The house groaned around us like a dying beast. I could hear my parents shouting from somewhere downstairs, but I couldn't make out the words over the roar of the flames. We made it to the top of the staircase. And for one brief moment, I thought we might actually make it out alive. That's when everything went to hell. The explosion came from the kitchen. Later, they'd say it was the mini propane tank Dad kept by the stove for his camping trips. The one he'd been meaning to store in the garage for months. The blast sent a shockwave through the entire house. And I watched in horror as a section of the ceiling directly above the staircase began to collapse. I didn't think. I just moved. I shoved Chloe forward with everything I had, sending her tumbling down the first few steps, away from the falling debris. Then the world came crashing down on top of me. The pain was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. Something heavy, burning hot, slammed into my head and leg. I felt bones crack, smelled my own hair singeing, tasted blood in my mouth. The weight pressed me down, pinning me to the floor. And for a moment, I couldn't breathe at all. Through the haze of agony and smoke, I saw them, firefighters in yellow gear, moving like angels through the inferno. I saw one of them scoop Chloe up, her arms reaching back toward me, her mouth forming my name. I tried to call out. I tried to tell them I was here, trapped under the rubble. But no sound came out. The last thing I remembered before the darkness took me was the feeling of strong hands grabbing my arms, pulling, and someone's voice saying something about a pulse. Then nothing. I woke up 3 days later in the ICU at County General. Every inch of my body screamed in protest as consciousness returned. My head felt like it had been split open and put back together wrong. My left leg was encased in a cast, elevated, throbbing with a deep, bone-deep ache that made me want to vomit. Bandages covered my arms, my chest, parts of my face. The room smelled like antiseptic and burned flesh. Machines beeped steadily around me, monitoring vitals I couldn't focus on. An IV dripped clear fluid into my arm. When I tried to move, to sit up, pain exploded through my entire body, and I gasped, tears springing to my eyes. A nurse appeared at my side almost immediately, her face kind but professional. She told me to stay still, that I'd been through major trauma, that I was lucky to be alive. She explained my injuries: fractured skull, compound fracture of the left femur, second-degree burns on my arms and back, smoke inhalation damage to my lungs. I'd undergone 2 surgeries already. I'd have months of recovery ahead of me. Then she told me Chloe was fine, just some minor smoke inhalation and a few bruises. She was in a room down the hall, already talking about going home. I should have felt relieved. I did feel relieved. But there was something else mixed in there too. Something I was too exhausted and drugged up to identify right then. That night, I heard them. My parents. They were in the hallway just outside my room, and the door wasn't quite closed all the way. Their voices carried clearly in the quiet of the ICU. I recognized my father's voice first, that authoritative boom he used when he wanted to make sure everyone understood he was in charge. But there was something different about it now. Something desperate. "Doctor, you need to understand our situation." That was Dad. Richard Morrison, 52 years old. Middle management at an insurance company. The irony wouldn't hit me until later. We've lost everything. The house is gone. Our savings, they're not what they should be. And now we've got 2 daughters in the hospital. Mr. Morrison, I understand this is difficult, but both your daughters are stable now. The doctor's voice was patient, professional. Maya's injuries are more severe, but with proper care and physical therapy, she should make a full recovery. Chloe can be discharged tomorrow. You don't understand. My mother's voice now, thin and reedy. Sarah Morrison, stay-at-home mom, 50 years old, with a talent for passive-aggressive manipulation that could rival any soap opera villain. We can't afford both of them. The medical bills alone will bankrupt us. There was a pause. I could almost picture the doctor's face, trying to comprehend what he was hearing. Mrs. Morrison, I'm not sure I understand what you're suggesting. What we're suggesting, Dad cut in, his voice dropping lower, more insistent, is that you need to be realistic with us about Maya's prognosis. She's 18. She's an adult. Chloe is still a minor. Still has her whole future ahead of her. My heart stopped. Literally felt like it stopped beating in my chest. Chloe has a full scholarship to Stanford. Mom added quickly. She's brilliant. Talented. She plays violin. She's in the National Honor Society. She volunteers at the Children's Hospital. She has potential. The word hung in the air like a death sentence. Potential. As if I didn't. As if my life was somehow worth less because I wasn't a prodigy. Wasn't collecting scholarship offers. Wasn't the perfect daughter they could brag about at cocktail parties. I'm sorry. But what exactly are you asking me? The doctor's voice had gone cold. Professional courtesy barely masking his disbelief. We're asking you to be honest about Maya's chances. Dad again. Always Dad. The one willing to say the awful things out loud while Mom just nodded along. If she's not going to make it anyway, if the recovery is going to be too difficult, too expensive, then maybe it's better to just let nature take its course. We can focus our resources on Chloe, on the daughter who actually has a future. I tried to scream, tried to move, tried to do anything to let them know I could hear them, that I was awake, that I was worth saving, but my body wouldn't cooperate. The pain medication had me pinned as effectively as that burning debris had. All I could do was lie there, tears streaming down my face, listening to my parents debate whether or not I deserved to live. Mr. and Mrs. Morrison. The doctor's voice was ice now. I need to be very clear with you. What you're suggesting is not only unethical, it's potentially criminal. Both of your daughters are going to survive their injuries. Maya's recovery will take time. Yes, but she is not terminal. She is not on life support. There is no decision to be made here about letting nature take its course. Do you understand me? We understand you perfectly. Doctor. Dad's voice had that edge to it now. The one he got when someone challenged his authority. We're just being practical. If we have to choose where to put our limited resources, we're going to choose the child who can actually benefit from them. Then I suggest you speak with the hospital's social services department. The doctor's footsteps moved away, his voice fading. Because this conversation is over. The silence that followed was deafening. Then Mom's voice. Small and whiny. He doesn't understand. Richard, we're not bad parents. We're just being realistic. I know. Honey. Dad's voice was soothing now. The same tone he used to use when Chloe or I had nightmares as kids. We'll figure this out. Chloe is what matters. She's our investment in the future. Their footsteps moved away, heading toward Chloe's room. I assumed. To comfort her. To assure her that everything would be okay. To remind her how precious and important she was. I laid there in the dark. Machines beeping around me. Pain radiating through every nerve, endingly 7. And felt something inside me break that had nothing to do with bones or burns. It was deeper than that. More fundamental. It was the death of whatever childish hope I'd been clinging to, that my parents actually loved me. There was someone else in the hallway that night, though I didn't know it at the time. Detective James Miller, 45 years old, 15 years on the force, and a nose for when something didn't smell right. He'd been at the fire scene, part of the standard investigation into a residential fire this severe. He'd noticed some things. Odd things. Fresh electrical work that looked amateurish at best. Dangerous at worst. An insurance policy that had been updated just 3 weeks before the fire, tripling the payout. A mini propane tank stored carelessly in a kitchen that already had gas lines. And now he was at the hospital, doing a routine follow-up interview with the family. And he'd heard every word of that conversation in the hallway. He stood there, hidden in the shadows of a supply closet, his jaw clenched, his hand writing furiously in his little notebook. He'd seen a lot in his years on the force. But parents debating whether to let their own child die for financial convenience, that was a new low. He made a mental note to dig deeper into Richard Morrison's finances, into that convenient insurance policy, into whether this fire had been as accidental as it seemed. But I didn't know about any of that yet. All I knew was pain and betrayal, and the crushing weight of being unwanted. The next 2 weeks in the hospital were a special kind of torture. Not just the physical pain, though that was constant and overwhelming. The medications helped, but there were always breakthrough waves of agony that left me gasping and sweating. Physical therapy started almost immediately. The speed in my protests. They needed to keep my muscles from atrophying. I needed to start working on range of motion in my injured leg. Every session felt like being set on fire all over again. But worse than the physical pain was watching my parents pretend to care. They visited. Of course, they had to keep up appearances. But their visits were short, perfunctory, and filled with barely concealed resentment. Mom would sit in the chair by my bed, scrolling through her phone, occasionally looking up to ask how I was feeling in a tone that suggested she didn't really want to know. Dad would stand by the window, talking about the insurance claim on the house, about how complicated everything was, about how expensive everything was becoming. The word expensive was always emphasized, always directed at me like an accusation. Chloe came too, escorted by Mom or Dad. She'd sit on the edge of my bed, her eyes red from crying, and hold my hand. She'd whisper thank you over and over. Tell me I was a hero. Tell me she loved me. And I believed her. I still do. Chloe never asked to be the favorite. She never asked to be the one they chose. She was just a kid who loved her big sister and felt guilty for surviving unscathed. It was on one of Dad's visits, when I was still too weak to really fight back, that I saw it. He thought I was asleep, knocked out by pain meds, but I was just lying there with my eyes closed, trying to manage the constant ache. He pulled something out of his jacket. Papers. I recognized the logo. Our insurance company. He was looking at my life insurance policy, the small one they'd taken out on both Chloe and me when we were kids. His finger traced down the page, stopping at the beneficiary line. His lips moved silently, calculating. Then he folded the papers back up and tucked them away. A small, satisfied smile on his face. That's when it hit me. The full, horrifying truth. They weren't just indifferent to whether I lived or died. They might actually be hoping I'd die. The insurance payout would help offset the hospital bills, the loss of the house. I was worth more to them dead than alive. I kept my eyes closed and let the tears slide silently down my temples into my hair. Detective Miller came by during my 3rd week in the hospital. He introduced himself casually, said he was just following up on some routine questions about the fire. He was a big guy, tall and broad-shouldered, with kind eyes that had seen too much and gray hair that suggested wisdom. He asked me simple questions at first. What did I remember? Where was everyone when the fire started? Had I noticed anything unusual before that night? I answered honestly, but something in his demeanor made me trust him. So when he asked, very carefully, if there was anything else I wanted to tell him, anything at all, he hesitated. Then, before I could second-guess myself, I told him about what I'd overheard, about my parents' conversation with the doctor, about Dad looking at my insurance papers. He didn't act surprised. He just nodded, wrote some things down, and told me to focus on getting better. But as he was leaving, he turned back and said something that I'd remember for the rest of my life. Miss Morrison, I've been doing this job for a long time, and I've learned that sometimes the worst fires aren't the ones that destroy buildings. They're the ones that burn inside people. The ones made of greed and selfishness and cold calculation. Those fires never go out on their own. Someone has to put them out. I didn't fully understand what he meant then, but I would. 2 months after the fire, I was discharged from the hospital. My leg was still in a cast, would be for another month. I had scars on my arms and back that the doctors said would fade with time and treatment, but would never fully disappear. I had physical therapy 3 times a week and a prescription for pain medication that I was terrified of becoming dependent on. I also had nowhere to go. The house was gone. Obviously. Just a blackened shell that the city had already condemned and scheduled for demolition. The insurance payout was in process, but Dad made it very clear that money was earmarked for rebuilding or buying a new house for them. For him, Mom, and Chloe. Not me. You're 18 now, he said, standing in my hospital room on discharge day, not even pretending to be sympathetic. Legally an adult. It's time you learn to stand on your own 2 feet. Well, foot. In your case, He actually laughed at his own joke. Mom wouldn't meet my eyes. She just clutched her purse and said something about how this was for the best. How I needed to learn responsibility. How they'd done their duty raising me to adulthood. Chloe wasn't there. She'd been enrolled in a prestigious summer program at Stanford, getting a head start on her scholarship. I hadn't seen her in 2 weeks. Part of me was grateful. I didn't want her to see this. Didn't want her to feel guilty for something that wasn't her fault. The hospital's social worker found me a spot in a transitional housing program for young adults. It was a dingy room in a converted motel on the bad side of town. But it was cheap, and it was temporary. The program would cover 3 months of rent while I was supposed to find a job and get on my feet. After that, I was on my own. I moved in with one backpack of donated clothes, my medication, and a walker the hospital had given me for free. Everything I owned in the world fit in a space smaller than my old closet. That first night, alone in that depressing room with its water-stained ceiling and the sound of traffic outside and someone screaming in the parking lot, I finally let myself break down. I sobbed until I couldn't breathe, until my throat was raw, until there were no tears left. I cried for the parents who didn't love me, for the home that was gone, for the girl I used to be who thought family meant something. Then I washed my face in the rust-stained sink, looked at myself in the cracked mirror, and made a promise. I would survive this. I would heal, and I would never, ever let anyone make me feel worthless again. The next morning, I started looking for work. Jobs are hard to find when you're 18 with no degree, no work experience, and a leg still in a cast. Most places took one look at me limping in on my walker and made polite excuses. Can't accommodate physical restrictions. Don't have positions available. We'll keep your application on file. The same rejections over and over until they started to blur together. I was about to give up for the day, my leg throbbing from walking farther than I should have. When I limped past a small diner called Frank's Place, it looked like something out of a 1,950 seconds postcard, all chrome and neon, but worn down by decades of hard use. A handwritten sign in the window said, "Help wanted." I almost kept walking. Who would hire someone who could barely stand for more than 20 minutes? But something made me push open the door. Maybe desperation. Maybe just the smell of coffee and bacon that reminded me of Saturday mornings when I was little. Before everything got complicated, the man behind the counter was huge. Not fat, just big, like he'd been a linebacker in another life. His head was shaved, his arms covered in faded tattoos, and he had the kind of face that looked like it had been broken and put back together a few times. He was wiping down the counter with a rag, and he looked up when I came in. "We're open for another hour," he said, his voice a low rumble. "Take any seat you want. I'm here about the job," I said, hating how small my voice sounded. The sign in the window. He looked me up and down, taking in the walker, the cast. The way I was swaying a little from exhaustion, his expression didn't change. "You got any experience?" "No, sir. But I'm a fast learner. I'm reliable. I'll work hard. I just need a chance." He studied me for a long moment. Then he set down his rag and crossed his arms. "What happened to your leg?" I could have lied. Could have made up some story about a car accident or a sports injury. But I was so tired of pretending, of trying to make everything seem fine when it wasn't. So I told him the truth. There was a fire. I got my sister out. Got hurt in the process. My parents decided I wasn't worth the medical bills. So here I am. His expression shifted then. Something flickered in his eyes. Something that looked like recognition or understanding. He nodded slowly. "I'm Frank," he said. "This is my place. Had it for 20 years? And I'll tell you straight, I don't need someone who's going to break down or quit after a week. This work is hard. Long hours. Difficult customers. Not great pay, but if you can handle it, and if you're honest with me, then we'll get along fine." "I can handle it," I said, and I meant it. "All right then. You can start tomorrow. 6 a.m. Wear comfortable shoes once that cast comes off. And Maya?" He paused. "Everyone's got a story. You don't owe me yours. But you also don't owe anybody an apology for surviving." I almost cried right there in the middle of his diner. Instead, I just nodded and said, "Thank you." I worked at Frank's Place for the next 2 years. and it saved my life in ways that had nothing to do with the paycheck. Frank became more than a boss. He became a mentor, a protector, a father figure in all the ways Richard Morrison had never been. He taught me about hard work and dignity and how to spot trouble before it spotted you. He taught me that kindness didn't mean weakness and that standing up for yourself wasn't the same as being cruel. The work was exactly as hard as he'd promised. I started as a dishwasher. Since I couldn't wait tables with my legs still healing, I spent hours at that industrial sink. My hands red and pruned, my back aching, scrubbing away at plates and pots and pans. But I didn't complain. I showed up every day at 6 a.m. sharp. I worked through my breaks when we were slammed, and I learned the rhythm of the place. When my cast finally came off after that first month, I started physical therapy in earnest. The therapist said my recovery was going well, that I'd likely have a slight limp for the rest of my life, but should regain most of my mobility. I pushed myself harder than she recommended, working through the pain, forcing my leg to cooperate. I needed to be strong again. Needed to be able to stand on my own. Frank noticed. He always noticed. He started letting me take short shifts as a server once I could stand for longer periods. Gave me the easier sections at first. The booths near the kitchen where I wouldn't have to walk as far. As he got stronger, he gave me more responsibility. More tables. More hours. More trust. The customers loved me. Or at least, most of them did. I had a good memory for orders. A genuine smile for people who were decent to me, and an ability to diffuse difficult situations with humor or empathy. The tips were good, better than I'd expected, and Frank let me keep every penny. I moved out of the transitional housing and into a tiny studio apartment above a laundromat. It wasn't much, just one room with a kitchenette and a bathroom, the size of a closet. But it was mine. I paid for it with my own money. I decorated it with cheap furniture from thrift stores and art prints I found at yard sales. I made it home. In my free time, which wasn't much, I started reading. Voraciously. I'd always been a decent student, but school had never felt particularly relevant to my life. Now, though, I was hungry for knowledge. I read books on business and finance, on law and contracts, on psychology and manipulation. I wanted to understand how the world worked, how money moved, how people hurt each other and got away with it. Frank noticed that too. He started bringing books from his own collection, leaving them in the break room for me. Books on entrepreneurship and negotiation, on recovering from trauma, on building yourself up from nothing. You're too smart to be slinging hash forever. He told me one night after closing, when it was just the two of us cleaning up. Not that there's anything wrong with the work, but you've got something in you. Kid, a fire. Don't let it burn you up. Use it. I didn't see Chloe much during those 2 years. She'd come by the diner occasionally, always looking uncomfortable, always with an apology or an excuse on her lips. She'd tell me about Stanford, about her music, about the amazing opportunities she was getting. She'd ask how I was doing in that careful way that suggested she didn't really want to know the details. Then she'd leave, and I'd feel hollowed out for days afterward. She didn't know, couldn't have known, that every time she talked about her scholarship, her dorm room, our meal plan, her stipend for books, I was calculating the cost in my head, adding up everything I didn't have, everything our parents had decided she deserved and I didn't. It wasn't her fault. I kept telling myself that, but it hurt anyway. I saw my parents even less. And when I did, it was always because they needed something. Dad came by once, 6 months after I'd started at Frank's, and asked me to sign some insurance papers. Something about closing out the claim on the house. I read them carefully. Something I'd learned to do, and realized he was trying to get me to waive any claim to any remaining funds. I refused. He left angry, muttering about ingratitude. Mom called occasionally, usually late at night, when I was exhausted from a double shift. She'd complain about how hard everything was, how expensive Chloe's education was, how they were barely scraping by in their new rented townhouse. She never asked how I was surviving, never offered to help, just wanted to unload her stress onto me like I was some kind of emotional dumping ground. I started letting her calls go to voicemail. During those 2 years, I also spent time with Detective Miller. He'd stop by the diner every few weeks, always sitting in my section, always ordering the same thing: black coffee and whatever pie we had that day. He'd chat casually at first, about the weather or the news or the other customers, but gradually, our conversation deepened. He told me about his investigation, how he'd found evidence that Richard had done shoddy electrical work on the house just weeks before the fire. Work that he wasn't qualified or licensed to do, how that same work had almost certainly caused the fire, how the insurance policy Richard had updated looked suspicious as hell, especially combined with everything else. But suspicious wasn't the same as criminal. The district attorney had looked at the case and determined there wasn't enough evidence to prove intentional arson or attempted insurance fraud. Negligence. Maybe. But nothing that would result in charges. The insurance company had paid out, though less than Richard had hoped for. And that was that the system failed you, Miller told me bluntly one afternoon, his coffee going cold in his hands. I know it. You know it. But sometimes that happens. Sometimes bad people get away with bad things because we can't prove intent, can't meet the burden of proof. It makes me sick, but it's reality. I nodded, stirring sugar into my own coffee. So what do I do with that? You live well, he said simply. You build a good life. You don't let them take anything else from you. And you remember that karma has a way of catching up with people. Maybe not today. Maybe not tomorrow. But eventually, the scales balance. I wanted to believe him. Some days I did. The turning point came 2 years to the day after the fire. I was working the lunch shift. Tired, but in a good mood. My leg barely bothered me anymore. I'd been saving money, tucking away every spare dollar, and had almost enough for a deposit on a better apartment. Frank had started teaching me about the business side of running a restaurant, letting me help with ordering and scheduling. I was thinking about taking some community college classes, maybe working toward a degree in business management. Then my father walked in. Richard Morrison strode into Frank's place like he owned it, dressed in one of his cheap suits, his tie perfectly knotted, his expression smug. He didn't come to my section. He sat at the counter, right in the middle where everyone could hear him, and ordered coffee from Frank. Then he started talking, loud enough for the whole diner to hear. This coffee is good, he said to Frank. Almost as good as what we're serving at Chloe's graduation party this weekend. You know Chloe. Right, my daughter. The one graduating from Stanford with honors. Full scholarship. Already has job offers lined up. I'm so proud of her. Frank glanced at me, his expression carefully neutral. He'd heard all about my family. Everyone who worked at the diner had, congratulations, Frank said shortly, pouring the coffee. Thank you. Thank you. Dad was practically preening. You know, it's funny. I have 2 daughters, but only one of them really made something of herself. The other one, he laughed, a cruel sound. Well, she's doing her best, I suppose. Waiting tables. Not everyone can be exceptional. Some people are just meant for manual labor. You know, someone's got to do the grunt work. The diner had gone quiet. Other customers were watching. Some confused, some uncomfortable. My coworker Jenny was staring at Richard with her mouth open. Still. Richard continued. At least she's not a burden anymore. At least she's not costing us money hand over fist like she did with all those medical bills. Silver lining. Right. We can afford to focus on Chloe now. The daughter worth investing in. Something inside me snapped. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just a clean, cold break. Like a bone that had been fractured for years, finally giving way completely. I set down my order pad, untied my apron, walked around the counter until I was standing directly in front of my father. I looked him right in the eyes, and for the first time in my life, I saw him flinch. Hello, Dad, I said calmly. I didn't realize you knew where I worked. I haven't heard from you in 8 months. Since you tried to get me to sign away my rights to any insurance money. His face went red. Maya, this isn't the place. No, I think it's the perfect place. I could feel Frank standing behind me, a silent wall of support. I think all these nice people should know what kind of man you are. Should know that when the house burned down and I was in the ICU with a fractured skull and a shattered leg, you told the doctor to let me die. That you said Chloe was the one worth saving because she had potential and I didn't. The diner was dead silent now. Someone's fork clattered on a plate. Should know that you kicked your injured daughter out with nowhere to go as soon as she turned 18. That you haven't given me a dime. I haven't called to check if I was alive. Haven't done anything except complain about how much I cost you. My voice was steady, cold as ice. So please, tell me more about how proud you are of Chloe. Tell me more about your exceptional daughter. Just remember that the only reason she's alive to be exceptional is because your other daughter, the one who's only good for manual labor, pulled her out of a burning building and nearly died in the process. Richard stood up, his face purple with rage. You ungrateful little. Careful. Frank's voice cut through the air like a knife. Real careful how you finish that sentence in my place. Richard looked at Frank, seemed to realize he was outmatched physically and socially, and grabbed his wallet instead. He threw a $5 bill on the counter, far less than the coffee cost, and stormed toward the door. He stopped at the threshold, turned back. You're dead to us. He spat. You understand me, dead. Don't come to Chloe's graduation. Don't call. Don't reach out. You're not part of this family anymore. I never was, I said quietly. I just finally figured that out. He left. The door slammed behind him. For a moment, no one moved. Then one of the regulars, old Mr. Patterson, who came in every day for eggs and toast, started clapping, slowly at first, then Festa, then Jenny joined in, then someone else. Within seconds, the entire diner was applauding. I stood there, shaking, tears streaming down my face, and let myself feel it. All of it. The pain, the anger, the grief for the family I'd never really had. And underneath all that, something new, something bright and fierce and wholly mine. Freedom. That night, Detective Miller came by just as we were closing. He slid into a booth and waited while I finished my closing duties. When I finally sat down across from him, he pushed a folder across the table. What's this? I asked. Everything I couldn't use in court, he said. Financial records, witness statements, technical reports on the electrical work. It's all circumstantial, all inadmissible for one reason or another. But it's true, and it's yours, if you want it. I opened the folder and started reading. With every page, the picture became clearer. Richard Morrison, struggling with debt he'd hidden from Sarah, desperate for a way out, doing cheap, dangerous electrical work himself to save money, updating the insurance policy, maybe not intending to burn the house down, but certainly not caring if something went wrong. And when something did go wrong, when his own daughter was dying, his first thought wasn't how to save her. It was how to capitalize on the situation. He's going to get away with it. Isn't he? I said, closing the folder. Legally. Yes, Miller said. But there are other kinds of justice. The insurance company is watching him now. Any future claims will be scrutinized heavily. His reputation in the community is shot among the people who know the truth. And you're alive. Maya, you're thriving. Sometimes the best revenge is building a life that proves they were wrong about you. I nodded slowly. Thank you. For everything. For believing me. For not giving up. Kid, I've been doing this job for 20 years. I've seen a lot of people go through hell. Most of them let it break them. But you, he smiled. You're not most people. After he left, I sat there alone in the empty diner. Frank's words from 2 years ago echoing in my head. Everyone's got a story. You don't owe anybody an apology for surviving. I decided right then that I wasn't just going to survive. I was going to thrive. I was going to build something so big, so successful, so undeniably mine that no one could ever again tell me I wasn't worth investing in. Which brings me to today, to the envelope in my hand and the conversation I'm about to have, because 2 weeks ago, I got a phone call. Not from my parents. From a social worker at the hospital. Chloe had been in a car accident. A bad one. She'd been T-boned by a drunk driver while heading home from a late-night study session. She was stable, but she needed a kidney transplant. Her remaining kidney had been damaged beyond repair in the accident. The social worker explained that they were looking for donors, that immediate family was the best match, that my parents had already been tested and weren't compatible, that I was the next option. I hung up without committing to anything. Then, predictably, my parents showed up at the diner. Together this time, a united front of desperation. Sarah was crying before she even sat down. Richard looked older, grayer. His suit rumpled like he'd been sleeping in it. Maya, please, Sarah started, reaching for my hand across the table. I pulled away. Chloe needs you. She needs a kidney transplant. I heard, I said calmly. Will you get tested? Richard asked. For once, his voice wasn't commanding. It was pleading. Will you see if you're a match? I looked at them both. Really looked at them. I saw the fear there, the genuine love they had for Chloe, even if they'd never had it for me. I saw the desperation of parents facing the loss of a child, and I felt nothing. I'll think about it, I said. Think about it. Richard's voice rose. Your sister is dying. Interesting, I said, my voice cold. When I was dying, you told the doctor to let nature take its course. You said I wasn't worth the medical bills. But now you want me to think about Chloe. That was different, Sarah said quickly. We were in shock. We didn't mean. You meant every word, I interrupted. And you've spent the last 2 years proving it. No calls. No visits. No acknowledgement that I exist, except when you needed something from me. And now you're here again, needing something. And you think I should just give it to you because we share DNA. She's your sister, Richard shouted. She's your daughter. I shot back. The one you chose. The one you invested in. The one you loved. So here's what's going to happen. I'm going to go to the hospital. I'm going to visit Chloe. And I'm going to make my decision based on what's right for her. Not for you. Because unlike you, I actually care about her as a person. Not as an investment or a status symbol. I stood up, leaving them sitting there. Now get out of my workplace. You're disturbing my customers. I went to the hospital that night. After my shift, I found Chloe's room and stood outside for a long moment, trying to decide if I could do this. Then I walked in. Chloe was awake, propped up on pillows, looking smaller and more fragile than I'd ever seen her. Her face lit up when she saw me. Maya, she breathed. You came. I sat in the chair next to her bed. Of course I came. You're my sister. Mom and Dad said they asked you to get tested. To don't, Addie. Her voice was careful. Testing. I told them they had no right. After everything they did to you, they have no right to ask you for anything. He blinked. Surprised. You know, about what they said in the hospital. I've known for a while. Chloe said softly. I overheard them talking about it once. About a year after the fire. They were drunk, celebrating my scholarship, and they let it slip. About how they wished it had been me who died instead of you who got hurt. How expensive you were. How they'd told the doctor to prioritize me. Tears slid down her cheeks. I confronted them. They denied it at first. Then made excuses. Said they were just scared and didn't mean it. But I knew. I've known this whole time that they chose me over you. And I've hated myself for it. Chloe. No. Let me finish. She grabbed my hand. I was too much of a coward to reach out. To stand up to them. To choose you the way they didn't. I convinced myself that if I stayed quiet, if I just accepted the opportunities they gave me, that somehow that honored your sacrifice. But it didn't. It just made me complicit in their cruelty. We sat there in silence for a moment. Both crying now. I don't want your kidney, Chloe said finally. I don't want you to feel obligated because we're family. Because family is supposed to mean something. They destroyed any right to call us family when they decided I was worth more than you. I squeezed her hand. Chloe, listen to me. You didn't ask to be the favorite. You didn't ask them to make that choice. And you've always been kind to me. Always loved me. Even when they didn't. This isn't about them. This isn't about obligation. If I get tested, if I donate, it's because I choose to. Because I love you. And because I'm not going to let their poison turn me into someone who could stand by and let you die just to make a point. Maya. No, I can't let you. Yes, you can. I smiled at her. But I need you to promise me something. I need you to promise that when you get through this, when you're healthy again, you'll live your life for you. Not for mom and dad. Not for me. For yourself. Promise me you'll set boundaries with them. That you'll call them out when they're toxic. That you won't let them use you to punish me or use me to manipulate you. Chloe nodded, fresh tears streaming. Y promise? And Maya, thank you. Not just for this, but for pulling me out of that fire. For saving my life then. You're the hero I've always thought you were, even when they couldn't see it. I stayed with Chloe for another hour. Just talking. Really talking. Maybe for the first time since we were kids. She told me about Stanford, but also about the pressure, the anxiety, the constant feeling that she had to be perfect to justify the investment. I told her about Frank's place, about my apartment, about the life I was building. When I finally left, I felt lighter somehow. Not healed. Not completely. But better. I got tested the next day. I was a perfect match. The surgery was scheduled for 2 weeks later. But before that surgery, I had one more conversation I needed to have. I asked my parents to meet me at a coffee shop near the hospital. Neutral territory. Public enough that they couldn't make a scene, but private enough that we could talk. They showed up early. Anxious. Hopeful. I let them sit there for 10 minutes before I arrived. Let them stew in their anticipation. When I finally sat down, I didn't order anything. I just pulled out the envelope and set it on the table between us. "What's this?" Richard asked. "My life insurance policy," I said calmly. "I updated it last year when I started making more money at the diner. Chloe is the sole beneficiary. If anything happens to me during the surgery or after, everything goes to her. Not a penny comes to either of you." Sarah gasped. "Maya, don't talk like that. Nothing is going to happen." "You're right." I agreed. "Statistically, the surgery is very safe. But I wanted you to know that even in death, you don't get to benefit from me. You don't get to cash in on my sacrifice. We never wanted Richard started." "Yes, you did." I cut him off. "Let's not pretend anymore. You wanted me to die in that hospital. You were disappointed when I survived. You saw me as a burden, a bad investment, something to be written off and forgotten. And you know what? I'm done pretending that's not what happened. I'm done making excuses for you or trying to earn love you're not capable of giving." I leaned forward, my voice low and intense. "I'm donating my kidney to Chloe because I love her. Because she's my sister and she doesn't deserve to suffer for your sins. But I'm not doing it for you. And after the surgery, after Chloe recovers, I'm done. No more family dinners. No more obligatory calls. No more pretending we're something we're not. Maya, please." Sarah was sobbing now. "We're your parents." "No," I said firmly. "Parents protect their children. Parents sacrifice for their kids. Not the other way around. Parents don't debate whether one child is worth more than another. You're the people who gave birth to me. But you stopped being my parents the night you told that doctor I wasn't worth saving." I stood up, preparing to leave. But Richard reached out, grabbed my wrist. His grip was tight, almost painful. "You think you're so much better than us," he hissed. "You think you've got it all figured out? But you're nothing. You'll always be nothing. A high school dropout slinging hash at some dive diner. Chloe is the success. Chloe is the one who matters." I looked down at his hand on my wrist, then back up at his face. I didn't pull away. I just smiled. "You're right about one thing," I said softly. "Chloe is successful. She's brilliant and talented, and she's going to do amazing things. But you're wrong about me. I'm not nothing. I'm a survivor. I'm someone who pulled herself up from nothing while you tried to push her down. I'm someone who learned to value herself when no one else would. And you know what the difference is between Chloe and me?" I leaned in close. "Chloe was given everything, and I was given nothing. And we both succeeded. But only one of us did it without your help. Only one of us proved she was worth something without needing you to tell her so. And deep down, in that black little corner where you keep your guilt, you know that the daughter you threw away was stronger than the one you kept." I pulled my wrist free. Now get your hand off me. And don't ever touch me again." I walked out of that coffee shop and didn't look back. The surgery went perfectly. I donated my kidney to Chloe on a Tuesday morning in April. I woke up sore and groggy, but alive. The doctor said I'd make a full recovery, that I could live a completely normal life with one kidney. Chloe's body accepted the transplant beautifully. My parents tried to visit me in recovery. I had the nurses turn them away, but I let Chloe come. Once she was strong enough, we held hands across the space between our hospital beds, and we laughed and cried and made plans for the future. She promised she'd come visit me once a month, just the two of us. No parents, no obligations, just sisters. She kept that promise. 6 months after the surgery, Detective Miller stopped by the diner with news. The insurance company had launched a full investigation into Richard Morrison's finances. Turned out, he'd been committing fraud for years. Not just with our house fire, but with other claims, false reports, inflated damages, staged incidents. The evidence was solid this time. Undeniable. He was facing criminal charges. The trial took another year. Richard was convicted on multiple counts of insurance fraud and sentenced to 5 years in prison. Sarah was charged as an accessory in some of the schemes. She got probation and community service, but their reputation was destroyed. They lost their house, their friends, their standing in the community. Chloe cut them off entirely. She changed her last name, got therapy, graduated from Stanford with honors, and took a job across the country. We talk every week. She visits when she can. We're building the relationship we should have had all along. One based on mutual respect and genuine love, not obligation or guilt. As for me, Frank retired 2 years ago and sold me the diner. I renamed it Second Chances and redesigned the whole space. It's thriving. We're known for our food. Sure, but also for our culture. I only hire people who need a break, who've been knocked down by life and are ready to fight back. FOMA foster kids. People in recovery. Anyone who's been told they're not worth investing in. I prove them wrong. The same way Frank proved me wrong. I'm 23 years old now. I own my own business. I have a beautiful apartment with actual furniture I bought new, not from thrift stores. I have friends who love me for who I am, not what I can do for them. I have scars on my body and scars on my heart, but I'm not ashamed of them. They're proof that I survived, that I'm still here, that I won. Sometimes I think about that night, the fire, the moment I chose to go back for Chloe even though it meant risking everything. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd just run. If I'd saved myself and left her to fate, but then I remember who I am. Who I've always been. Someone who loves fiercely, even when that love isn't returned. Someone who does the right thing, even when it costs her everything. Someone who survived because she refused to let hate and bitterness consume her the way the flames consumed our house. They chose Chloe that night in the hospital, but I chose myself every day after, and that choice, that decision to stand up and fight for my own worth, made all the difference. I used to be afraid of fire. Now I respect it. Fire destroys. Yes, but it also forges. It purifies. It burns away everything weak and leaves behind only what's strong enough to withstand the heat. I was forged in those flames, and I came out stronger than anyone ever expected. So here's what I want you to know. If you're listening to this and feeling like you're the one nobody chose, if you're the child or the friend or the partner who always comes second, if you're the one sacrificing everything while someone else gets all the glory, you are not worthless. You are not less than. You are not defined by someone else's inability to see your value. Sometimes the people who are supposed to love us most are the ones who hurt us deepest. Sometimes family is the word they use to manipulate us into accepting treatment we'd never tolerate from strangers. Sometimes the only way to survive is to walk away from the people who are supposed to be there forever. And that's okay. You are allowed to save yourself. You are allowed to set boundaries. You are allowed to say no, even to family, even when they're desperate, even when they call you selfish or ungrateful or cruel. Because the cruelest thing isn't walking away from people who hurt you. It's staying and teaching them that you'll accept whatever scraps they're willing to throw you. I'm not going to tell you that everything works out in the end. That karma always catches up with bad people, or that living well is the best revenge. Sometimes bad people live happy lives, and good people suffer. That's just reality. But I will tell you this, you get to decide what your life means. You get to decide what you're worth. And once you make that decision, once you truly believe it in your bones, no one can take it away from you. They tried to bury me. They thought I'd crumble under the weight of rejection and pain and medical bills and isolation. They thought I'd come crawling back, begging for whatever crumbs of affection they were willing to spare. Instead, I bloomed. If you've made it this far in my story, if it resonated with you, do-me a favor, hit that like button, subscribe so you don't miss future stories, and drop a comment below telling me about your own fire, your own moment of survival, or your own journey from victim to victor. I want to hear your story, because we're all in this together. All of us who were told we weren't enough and decided to prove them wrong. What would you have done in my position? Would you have donated the kidney? Would you have walked away? Would you have forgiven them? Let me know in the comments. And remember, you are the fire. You are the phoenix. You are the one who survives. Don't let anyone tell you different.